The red dust swirled around Jake Morrison's boots as he stepped off the transport ship. The twin suns of Kepler 442b burned overhead, casting strange shadows across the alien landscape. This was his first time on an alien world, and everything felt wrong. The gravity was heavier than Earth, the air tasted metallic. Even the color of the sky was different. Jake adjusted his pack and looked around at the other recruits. Most of them were not human. There were tall, thin creatures with crystal-like skin called Etherians. Their bodies sparkled in the sunlight like living diamonds. Next to them stood the Chronari, massive beings covered in thick armor plating. They looked like walking tanks. And scattered among the group were the Zephyrians, insect-like aliens with compound eyes and 4 arms. Only 3 humans had made it into this training program. Jake was one of them. The other 2 were Maria Santos and Rick Cole. Rick was their squad leader, a tough sergeant from Texas who had seen combat on Mars. Maria was a medic from California who spoke 5 languages. Jake felt out of place among them. He was just a regular guy from Ohio who had joined the Space Marines to see the galaxy. The training facility looked like a military base built inside a canyon. Metal buildings were carved into the red rock walls. Towers and communication arrays reached toward the alien sky. Soldiers from different worlds moved around the base, each group keeping to themselves. Jake wondered if he would fit in here. A voice called out behind him. "Hey, you must be the new humans." Jake turned to see a Zephyrian approaching. The alien was shorter than most of his kind, with bright green markings on his carapace. His compound eyes reflected the sunlight like mirrors. Most Zephyrians were cold and serious, but this one seemed different. He was actually smiling, or at least doing whatever passed for smiling among his species. "I'm Kekstar," the alien said, extending one of his 4 hands. "I heard we might be in the same squad." Jake shook the offered hand. The Zephyrian's grip was firm but not crushing. "Jake Morrison, nice to meet you." "Morrison, huh? That's a good strong name. I like it." Kekstar's mandibles clicked in what Jake would later learn was laughter. "Come on, let me show you around. This place can be confusing at first." As they walked through the base, Kekstar pointed out the important buildings. The mess hall where all the species ate together. The training grounds where they would spend most of their time. The medical bay where injuries were treated. The barracks where they would sleep. "So what's a human like you doing here?" Kekstar asked as they paused near a weapons rack. "I thought your people were new to the galaxy," Jake shrugged. "We are, but we want to do our part in the coalition. My planet has been protected by alien forces for years. Now it's time for us to help protect others." "That's honorable," Kekstar said. "My people have been part of the coalition for over a century. We're good at following orders and working as a team. But I've heard humans are different, more individual." "Maybe," Jake said. "But we also believe in looking out for each other. We don't leave people behind." Kekstar's compound eyes studied him. "Interesting. On my world, we serve the hive first. The individual comes second. But I think I like your way better." Over the next few days, Jake and Kekstar became friends. It surprised everyone, including themselves. Zephyrians were known for being logical and emotionless. Humans were known for being unpredictable and emotional. But somehow the 2 clicked. They ate meals together in the mess hall, sharing stories about their homeworlds. Kekstar told Jake about the great hive cities of Zephyr Prime, where millions of his people lived in perfect harmony. Jake told Kekstar about Earth's blue skies and green forests, about baseball games and family barbecues. They trained together too. Jake helped Kekstar with hand-to-hand combat techniques. Kekstar taught Jake how to move silently and spot hidden enemies. They pushed each other to be better soldiers. The other recruits watched their friendship with interest. It was rare to see such a bond between different species. Most aliens stuck with their own kind. But Jake and Kekstar seemed to understand each other in a way that transcended species barriers. Their squad included 6 other beings from different worlds. There was Velther, an Etherian who served as their medic. She was tall and graceful, with healing abilities that bordered on magic. Her crystalline skin could glow with soft blue light when she used her powers. There was Grok, a massive Chronari warrior whose armor was covered in battle scars. He spoke little but carried the biggest weapons anyone had ever seen. His deep voice could make the ground shake when he shouted orders. The squad also included two more Zephyrians named Ixpol and Retin, who were more typical of their species. They were efficient and cold, following orders without question. They seemed puzzled by Kekstar's friendship with the human. Rick Cole led the squad with firm discipline. He treated everyone equally, regardless of their species. Maria Santos helped bridge communication gaps between the different aliens. She had a gift for understanding others, even when they didn't speak the same language. The training was brutal. Every day brought new challenges designed to test their limits. They ran obstacle courses in the heavy gravity. They practiced combat scenarios in the canyon system. They learned to work together despite their different abilities and instincts. Jake struggled with some of the training. His human body wasn't built for the heavy gravity of this world. He was stronger than the Etherians, but slower than the Zephyrians. He couldn't see as well as the Chronari or heal as fast as the others. But he had something else. Determination. When other recruits wanted to give up, Jake kept going. When training exercises seemed impossible, Jake found a way. When his alien squad mates felt discouraged, Jake reminded them why they were there. Humans are stubborn, he would say with a grin. We don't know when to quit. Kekstar found this attitude fascinating. Your species is either very brave or very foolish, he would say. Maybe both, Jake would reply. But it's kept us alive so far. As weeks passed, the squad grew closer. They learned to trust each other in combat situations. They shared resources and covered for each other's weaknesses. Even Velther, who initially seemed cold and distant, began to show respect for her squad mates, but Jake noticed that Kekstar was struggling more than the others. The heavy gravity was wearing on him. His movements became slower and more labored. His usually bright personality grew dimmer as the training intensified. You okay, buddy? Jake asked one evening as they cleaned their equipment, Kekstar's compound. Eyes flickered with exhaustion. Just tired. The gravity here is much heavier than my homeworld. My people weren't built for this. Want to talk about it? Jake offered. There's nothing to talk about. I must adapt or fail. Those are the only options. Jake could hear the strain in his friend's voice. You know, on Earth we have a saying, a problem shared is a problem halved. Maybe I can help somehow. Kekstar's mandibles clicked softly. You're already helping, Jake, just by being my friend. That means more than you know. The next morning brought news of their final test, a 15-mile tactical march through the canyon system. They would carry full gear and simulated casualties. It would test everything they had learned about endurance, teamwork, and survival. Jake looked at the briefing materials and felt a chill run down his spine. 15 miles in this gravity, carrying equipment and wounded squad mates. It would push everyone to their limits. He glanced at Kekstar, who was studying the route map with determined focus. His friend was already struggling with the daily training. How would he handle this ultimate test? Don't worry, Jake said quietly. We'll get through this together. Kekstar looked up at him. Together? That's what friends do, Jake said. We stick together no matter what. As they prepared for the march, Jake made a silent promise to himself. Whatever happened out there in the canyon, he would not let his friend down. He would not leave anyone behind. That was the human way. The transport would drop them at the starting point at dawn. From there, they would have to find their own way back to base. It would be the hardest thing any of them had ever done, but Jake was ready. He had trained his whole life for this moment, even if he didn't know it at the time. This was what it meant to be human. This was what it meant to be a friend. The transport dropped them at the edge of the canyon system just as the first sun rose over the horizon. Jake looked out at the rocky landscape stretching before them. Red stone formations jutted up from the ground like ancient towers. Deep cracks split the earth, creating narrow passages that would be difficult to navigate. Rick Cole gathered the squad around him. Listen up, everyone. We have 15 miles to cover before sunset. The route will take us through some of the most dangerous terrain on this planet. Watch your footing and stay together. Jake adjusted his pack and checked his equipment one more time. He carried a standard loadout: rifle, ammunition, water, food, medical supplies, and survival gear. The weight felt manageable now, but he knew it would feel much heavier after several hours of walking. Kekstar stood beside him, breathing harder than usual. The alien's compound eyes were dim, and his movements seemed sluggish. Jake could see that his friend was already struggling, and they had not even started walking yet. "Remember," Rick continued, "this is a tactical march. We might encounter enemy forces. We have simulated casualties to carry, and the terrain will test every skill we have learned." Velthor stepped forward. Her crystalline skin caught the morning light, making her look like a living sculpture. "I will monitor everyone's health during the march. If anyone shows signs of serious distress, inform me immediately." The squad moved out in formation. Rick took point, leading them into the canyon system. Maria walked beside him, her medic training making her valuable for spotting potential hazards. Jake and Kekstar followed in the middle of the group, with the other aliens bringing up the rear. The first hour of the march went smoothly. They made good time across relatively flat ground. The canyon walls rose up around them, providing some shade from the burning suns. Jake felt confident about their chances, but as they moved deeper into the canyon system, the terrain became more challenging. The ground grew rocky and uneven. Loose stones shifted under their feet. The path narrowed in places, forcing them to move in single file. Jake kept a close eye on Kekstar. His friend was falling behind, struggling to keep up with the pace. The heavy gravity was taking its toll. Sweat beaded on the alien's carapace, and his breathing was becoming labored. "You need to rest?" Jake asked quietly. Kekstar shook his head. "I can keep going. I have to keep going. There's no shame in taking a break." "There is shame in failing my squad," Kekstar replied firmly. "I will not be the weak link." Jake wanted to argue, but he knew his friend was proud. Zephyrians valued duty and honor above personal comfort. Admitting weakness was difficult for them. The squad pressed on. They navigated narrow passages between towering rock walls. They climbed over fallen boulders and descended into deep ravines. The alien landscape was beautiful but treacherous. 3 hours into the march, they encountered their first simulated casualty. A training dummy was positioned near a cliff face, representing a wounded soldier who needed to be carried. Rick assigned the task to 2 of the stronger squad members. "This is what we trained for," he said. "In real combat, we would never leave a wounded comrade behind." Jake nodded, thinking about the human military tradition of leaving no one behind. It was a principle that had guided his people through countless conflicts. He wondered if the other species shared the same commitment. They continued walking, now carrying the additional weight of the simulated casualty. The pace slowed, and everyone felt the extra burden. Jake could see that Kekstar was struggling even more now. The canyon walls grew higher and more imposing. Strange rock formations created natural obstacles that had to be climbed or circumvented. The path became a series of switchbacks that wound up and down the rocky slopes. Jake moved closer to Kekstar, ready to help if needed. His friend's movements were becoming increasingly unsteady. The alien's 4 legs were not finding their usual sure footing on the loose stones. "Maybe we should tell Rick you need a break," Jake suggested. "No," Kekstar said firmly. "I will not slow down the squad. I will not be the reason we fail this test." Jake admired his friend's determination, but he was growing worried. Kekstar's breathing was becoming more labored with each step. His compound eyes were losing their usual bright focus. The squad reached a particularly challenging section of the canyon. The path led along a narrow ledge carved into the rock face. Below them, a deep ravine stretched down into darkness. Above them, loose rocks and gravel created a constant threat of falling debris. Rick called for extra caution. "Take your time here. Make sure each step is secure before moving forward." The squad moved carefully along the ledge. Jake stayed close behind Kekstar, ready to steady him if he stumbled. The alien's movements were becoming more erratic as exhaustion set in. Halfway across the ledge, disaster struck. A section of loose rock gave way beneath Kekstar's feet. The alien let out a sharp cry as he lost his balance and tumbled backward. Jake reached out instinctively, trying to catch his friend, but it was too late. Kekstar rolled down the steep slope beside the ledge, his body bouncing off rocks and debris. The sound of his carapace cracking against stone echoed through the canyon. "Kekstar!" Jake shouted, watching in horror as his friend disappeared into the ravine below. The squad immediately stopped. Rick called for everyone to hold position while he assessed the situation. Jake was already moving, carefully making his way down the slope to reach his fallen friend. "Morrison, wait for backup," Rick ordered, but Jake was not listening. He could see Kekstar lying motionless on a rocky ledge 20 feet below. His friend needed help, and Jake was not going to waste time waiting for permission. Jake slid down the slope, using his hands and feet to control his descent. Loose rocks scattered around him as he fought to reach the ledge where Kekstar lay. His heart pounded as he saw the extent of his friend's injuries. Kekstar was unconscious, his body twisted at an unnatural angle. Green fluid that served as his blood was seeping from cracks in his carapace. One of his rear legs was bent in a way that made Jake's stomach turn. "Kekstar," Jake said softly, kneeling beside his friend. "Can you hear me?" The alien's compound. Eyes flickered open, but they were unfocused and dim. "Jake?" he whispered. "What happened?" "You fell. But you're going to be okay. Help is coming." Kekstar tried to move but cried out in pain. "I cannot feel my leg." "Something is wrong." Jake looked up to see Velther making her way down the slope. The Etherean medic moved with graceful precision, her crystalline form glowing with soft blue light as she activated her healing abilities. "Step back," Velther ordered as she reached the ledge. "Let me examine him." Jake moved aside but stayed close. He watched as Velther's hands moved over Kekstar's body, her healing powers probing for injuries. The alien's breathing was shallow and rapid, signs of shock setting in. After several minutes of examination, Velther stood up. Her expression was grim and the glow of her healing abilities faded. "How bad is it?" Jake asked. Velther looked at him with her crystalline eyes. "The damage is extensive. Multiple fractures in the exoskeleton, internal bleeding, severe trauma to the locomotor system. But you can heal him, right? That's what you do." The Etherean medic shook her head slowly. "Not here, not with these injuries. And our limited supplies. In a proper medical facility, perhaps, but not in field conditions." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that this soldier's injuries are beyond what can be treated in the field. In military terms, he would be classified as expectant." Jake knew that term from his training. Expectant casualties were those too severely injured to treat. With available resources, they would be made comfortable but left to die so that medical supplies could be used on soldiers with better chances of survival. "You're giving up on him?" Jake asked, his voice rising. "I'm being realistic about our situation," Velther replied calmly. "We have limited medical supplies and no way to evacuate him. The logical choice is to continue the mission and recover him later. Later might be too late. That is a risk we must accept. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few." Jake stared at the medic in disbelief. He looked down at Kekstar, who was drifting in and out of consciousness. His friend was dying, and the person supposed to save him was walking away. "We cannot leave him here," Jake said firmly. "We can and we will," Velther replied. "It is the practical decision. The mission must continue." The rest of the squad had gathered on the ledge above, watching the exchange. Jake could see the conflict in their faces. They understood the logic of the medic's decision, but they also felt the pull of loyalty to their squad mate. "This is not right," Jake said, his voice carrying up to the others. "We do not leave people behind. That is not how we do things." "That is how the military does things," Velther said coldly. "Resources are limited, choices must be made. This is basic military doctrine." Jake looked at his dying friend, then back at the medic. "Maybe that's your military doctrine, but it's not mine." He knelt beside Kekstar again, his mind racing. There had to be something he could do. Some way to save his friend when everyone else had given up? "I'm not leaving you here," Jake whispered to Kekstar. "I promise." The alien's compound eyes focused on him with difficulty. "Jake, you must go. Do not let my failure ruin the mission." Jake knelt beside Kekstar on the rocky ledge, his mind working fast. The alien medic had given up, but Jake refused to accept that his friend was going to die. There had to be something he could do. Something the others had not thought of. "Lieutenant Morrison," Velther called from above. "We are moving out. The squad cannot wait any longer." Jake looked up at the crystalline medic. "Give me your medical supplies. I will not waste precious resources on a hopeless case." "Then give me mine. Give me everyone's medical supplies." Rick Cole appeared at the edge of the ledge. "Morrison, what are you planning?" "I'm going to save him," Jake said simply. "I'm going to stabilize his injuries and get him out of here." "Son, that's impossible," you heard the medic. "His injuries are too severe." Jake pulled out his own medical kit and began sorting through the supplies. "Maybe for her, but I'm not giving up." The other squad members gathered above, watching Jake work. They looked uncertain, torn between following orders and helping their squad mate. "I need supplies," Jake called up to them. "Medical tape, bandages, anything you can spare." Maria Santos was the first to respond. She dropped her medic pack. "Down to Jake?" "Use whatever you need," she said. One by one, the other squad members began dropping supplies. Even the cold Zephyrians contributed their medical kits. Only Velther refused to help. "This is foolish," she said. "You are wasting time and resources." Jake ignored her. He was focused on Kekstar, who was breathing rapidly and losing more green blood from his wounds. The alien's compound eyes were growing dimmer. "Stay with me, buddy," Jake said as he worked. "I'm going to get you home." Jake's field medic training kicked in. He had learned basic trauma care, but treating a Zephyrian was different from treating a human. The alien's anatomy was complex, with multiple internal chambers and a distributed circulatory system, but Jake had studied coalition physiology during their training. He knew where the major blood vessels were located. He knew how to apply pressure to stop bleeding. He knew the basics of keeping someone alive until proper medical care could be provided. Working quickly, Jake used medical foam to seal the worst of the internal bleeding. He wrapped pressure bandages around the damaged sections of Kekstar's carapace. The alien's breathing stabilized slightly, giving Jake hope. The real problem was the shattered leg. Even if Jake could keep Kekstar alive, the alien would never be able to walk 10 miles to the extraction point. The leg was bent at an impossible angle. With bone fragments visible through the cracked exoskeleton, Jake stared at the broken limb, his mind racing. He needed to immobilize it somehow. Create a splint that would keep the bones aligned and prevent further damage. But what could he use? His eyes fell on his equipment pack. The frame was made of lightweight carbon fiber, designed to be both strong and flexible. If he could take it apart, he might be able to create a splint assembly. "What are you doing now?" Velther asked from above. "Making a splint," Jake replied, pulling out his tactical knife. "A splint? With what materials?" Jake began cutting strips from his pack frame, whatever I can find. The Etherian medic's laugh was cold and mocking. "You think you can create a functional medical device from camping equipment? Your species' arrogance is astounding." Jake did not respond. He was too busy working. He cut carbon fiber strips and shaped them to match the curve of Kekstar's leg. He used medical tape to secure the pieces together. He patted the splint with foam from his sleeping roll. The other squad members watched in fascination as Jake's improvised splint took shape. It was crude compared to modern medical equipment, but it was functional. More importantly, it was working. "The bones need to be aligned properly," Jake muttered, studying Kekstar's leg. "This is going to hurt." Kekstar's eyes flickered open. "Do what you must," he whispered. Jake took a deep breath and began the delicate process of straightening the broken leg. Kekstar cried out in pain, but Jake did not stop. He worked with steady hands, feeling for the bone fragments and guiding them back into position. When the leg was straight, Jake carefully applied the splint. He wrapped it with medical tape, creating a rigid support system that would keep the bones from moving. The carbon fiber was strong enough to handle the stress, and the padding protected the damaged tissue. "There," Jake said, sitting back to examine his work. "That should hold." Velther had climbed down to the ledge to observe. She studied the splint with professional interest. "Primitive, but potentially effective," she admitted grudgingly. "However, you still face an impossible problem." "What problem?" "Transportation. Even with the splint, this soldier cannot walk, and you cannot carry him 10 miles through this terrain." Jake looked at Kekstar, who weighed nearly 200 pounds. In the heavy gravity of this planet, the medic was right. It should have been impossible. "Maybe for you," Jake said, standing up, "but I'm human." He began pulling equipment from his pack, laying it out on the ledge. Rope, webbing, carabiners, and straps. All the gear he would need to create a carrying system. "You cannot be serious," Velther said, "dead serious." Jake was already working, his hands moving with practiced efficiency. "Humans are persistence. Hunters, we evolved to chase prey across impossible distances. 10 miles is nothing. You will collapse from exhaustion within the first mile. We'll see about that." Jake's carrying system was another masterpiece of improvised engineering. He used his climbing harness as a base, adding extra straps and padding to distribute the weight. He created a frame from tent poles and pack stays, designed to support Kekstar's body without putting pressure on his injured leg. The other squad members had climbed down to watch. Even Rick Cole looked impressed, despite himself. "That's some fancy rigging," the sergeant said. "But can it work?" "Only one way to find out," Jake replied. He tested the harness, adjusting the straps and checking the connections. Everything felt secure. The weight distribution was as good as he could make it with available materials. "Jake," Kekstar said weakly, "you do not have to do this." "Yes, I do." Jake knelt beside his friend. "That's what friends are for. In my culture, the individual is expected to sacrifice for the group. You are risking everything for one person. In my culture, we believe everyone matters, no one gets left behind." Kekstar's mandibles clicked softly. "Your species is either very brave or very foolish. Probably both," Jake said with a grin. "But it's kept us alive so far." With help from the other squad members, Jake carefully lifted Kekstar into the carrying harness. The alien's injured leg was supported by the splint assembly, keeping it stable and protected. The weight was enormous. Jake felt his knees buckle as he stood up with his friend on his back. 200 pounds of injured alien plus equipment. It was like carrying a refrigerator through a desert. "This is madness," Velther said, shaking her head. "You will kill yourself attempting this." Jake took his first step, then another. His legs screamed in protest, but he kept moving. "You know what the difference is between humans and most other species? Enlighten me." "We're too stubborn to know when something is impossible." Jake began walking, carrying Kekstar on his back. The other squad members fell into formation around him, ready to help if needed. Even Velther followed, though she continued to predict failure. The first 100 yards were the hardest. Jake's body rebelled against the impossible weight. His back ached, his legs shook, and sweat poured down his face. But he found his rhythm, the steady pace that his ancestors had used to run down mammoths on the African plains. "How do you feel?" Jake asked Kekstar. "Like I am riding on the back of a very stubborn human," the alien replied weakly. "Good, that means you're still alive." Jake talked to Kekstar as they walked, keeping his friend conscious and alert. He told stories about Earth, about the long history of humans carrying their wounded from battlefields. He spoke of soldiers who had crawled miles with broken legs, of medics who had carried the wounded through enemy fire. "On Earth we have a saying," Jake said as they climbed a rocky slope. "Leave no one behind. It's not just words. It's who we are, even when it seems impossible." "Especially when it seems impossible." The other squad members were struggling to keep up with Jake's pace. The humans seemed to have found a sustainable rhythm. his breathing steady despite the enormous load he carried. Velthor watched in growing amazement. "Your species is remarkable," she said to Maria Santos. "You're just figuring that out?" Maria replied, "We've been trying to tell you." After the first mile, Jake showed no signs of slowing down. His pace remained steady, his breathing controlled. The impossible weight on his back seemed to have become just another piece of equipment. "How are you doing this?" Velthor asked, running alongside him. "Practice?" Jake replied. "Every human is born knowing how to do this. We just don't usually have to practice. Millions of years of evolution. My ancestors used to run animals to death across the African savanna. They would chase a gazelle for 20 miles until it collapsed from exhaustion. 10 miles with a friend on my back. That's just Tuesday." The squad pressed on through the canyon system. Jake's impossible feat was becoming legend with each step. The human who refused to leave his friend behind. The soldier who carried hope when everyone else had given up. As they reached the halfway point, Jake was still going strong. His legs were tired, his back ached, but his spirit was unbroken. Jake's boots hit the rocky ground in a steady rhythm. Left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. He had been walking for 4 hours now, carrying Kekstar on his back through the harsh canyon terrain. His legs burned with every step, but he refused to slow down. The other squad members were falling behind. The Etherians, with their graceful movements, were not built for this kind of endurance march. The Chronari, despite their strength, were too heavy for sustained running. Even the other humans, Maria and Rick, were breathing hard as they tried to keep up, but Jake maintained his pace. His breathing was deep and controlled. Sweat soaked his uniform, but his steps never faltered. The weight on his back had become part of him, like an extension of his own body. "How are you holding up back there?" Jake asked Kekstar. The alien's voice was weak but steady. "Better than I should be." "Your splint is working. The pain is manageable." "Good, we're making great time." Velthor jogged alongside them, her crystalline features showing amazement. "Lieutenant Morrison, you have been carrying him for over 5 miles. Your heart rate should be dangerous by now." Jake glanced at her. "My heart rate is fine. This is what humans do." "No species can maintain this pace while carrying such a load." "You keep saying that," Jake replied, "but here I am doing it." The medic pulled out a medical scanner and pointed it at Jake. The device beeped softly as it analyzed his vital signs. Velthor stared at the readings in disbelief. "This is impossible," she said. "Your heart rate is elevated but stable. Your body temperature is within normal range. By all medical logic, you should have collapsed miles ago." "Maybe your medical logic needs updating," Maria Santos said, running up beside them. "Humans are persistence hunters. We evolved to do exactly this." "Persistence hunters?" "Our ancestors hunted by chasing animals until they died of exhaustion," Maria explained. "A human can outrun a horse over long distances. We can keep going when everything else stops." Jake nodded as he climbed over a fallen boulder, never breaking stride. "On Earth, we have ultramarathon races. People run 100 miles through deserts and mountains. Some races last for days. This is just a warm-up." Kekstar shifted slightly on Jake's back. "You never told me this about your species." "Never came up in conversation," Jake said with a grin. "Hey, want to hear about the time humans chased mammoths across ice sheets?" As Jake told stories about human endurance, the squad continued through the canyon system. The terrain was getting more difficult. They had to climb steep slopes and navigate narrow passages between towering rock walls, but Jake adapted to every obstacle. When the path was too narrow, he turned sideways and shuffled through. When they had to climb, he used his hands and feet while keeping Kekstar secure on his back. When loose rocks threatened to trip him, he found sure footing with the instincts of someone born to run. The other squad members watched in growing awe. What had started as a rescue mission was becoming something legendary, the human who refused to quit, the soldier who carried his friend through impossible terrain. "I am beginning to understand," said Ixpol, one of the Zephyrians. "This is not just physical capability. This is something deeper." "What do you mean?" asked Retin, his squad mate. The human could have left the injured one behind. It would have been logical, practical, but he chose a different path. An irrational path, perhaps. But perhaps there is wisdom in such irrationality. Jake heard their conversation and smiled. It's not irrational to help a friend. It's the most rational thing in the world. They reached a particularly challenging section where the path split into two routes. One way was shorter but more dangerous, leading across a narrow bridge of natural rock. The other was longer but safer, winding around the canyon wall. Rick Cole studied both options. The safe route will add 2 miles to our journey. The dangerous route could save time, but one wrong step. We take the bridge, Jake said without hesitation. Morrison, that's risky. If you fall with Kekstar on your back, fall. Jake approached the natural stone bridge. It was only 3 feet wide, with deep chasms on both sides. The surface was smooth and treacherous, worn down by wind and rain over countless years. Jake, Kekstar said nervously. Perhaps the longer route would be safer. Trust me, Jake replied. I've got this. Jake stepped onto the bridge with complete confidence. His movements were precise and controlled. Each step was carefully placed, tested for stability before he committed his full weight. The massive load on his back actually helped, lowering his center of gravity and making him more stable. The other squad members held their breath as Jake crossed the narrow span. One slip would send both him and Kekstar plummeting into the abyss below, but Jake moved like he was walking across solid ground. Halfway across, a gust of wind struck the bridge. Jake swayed slightly but never lost his balance. He adjusted his posture, compensated for the wind, and kept moving forward. Incredible, Velthor whispered. The precision required for such movement while carrying that load, Humans have excellent balance, Maria explained. We evolved to walk upright across all kinds of terrain. Jake is just using abilities we all have. Jake reached the other side of the bridge safely. He turned and waved to the others. Come on, it's easier than it looks. One by one, the squad members crossed the bridge. Some were more nervous than others, but they all made it safely. When Velthor reached the other side, she looked at Jake with new respect. You saved us significant time, she said. But the risk. Sometimes you have to take risks to help your friends, Jake replied. That's part of being human too. They continued through the canyon system. The twin suns were moving across the sky, marking the passage of time. They had covered 8 miles so far, with 7 more to go. Jake's pace never wavered. His breathing remained steady. The impossible load on his back seemed to weigh nothing at all. He was in what humans called the zone, that perfect state where mind and body worked in complete harmony. Tell me more about Earth, Kekstar said as they walked. I want to understand what made you this way, Jake thought for a moment. Earth is a harsh planet in many ways. Our ancestors faced ice ages, droughts, predators, diseases. The weak died young, only the strong and determined survived. But that describes many species. True, but humans had something else. We learned to work together, to help each other. A human alone might die, but a group of humans could survive anything. Even carrying wounded friends impossible distances? Especially that, Jake said. We figured out early that everyone had value. The smart one who got injured might remember where the water was. The strong one who got hurt might know how to make fire. We couldn't afford to lose anyone. Velthor was listening to their conversation. So this behavior is evolutionary? Bred into your species over millions of years? In a way, Jake replied, but it's more than that. It's a choice. Every human makes the choice to help or to walk away. I chose to help. They reached another obstacle, a steep slope covered in loose scree. The rock shifted underfoot, making climbing treacherous. Most of the squad struggled with the unstable surface, but Jake attacked the slope with determination. He used a technique called scree running, where he let the loose rocks carry him forward while maintaining balance. With Kekstar on his back, he surfed down the shifting stones like he was riding a wave. How did you learn to do that? Rick asked when they reached the bottom. I didn't learn it, Jake said. I just did it. Sometimes you have to trust your instincts. The squad pressed on. 9 miles down, 6 to go, Jake showed no signs of fatigue. If anything, he seemed to be getting stronger as the journey continued. "There is something I do not understand," said Grok, the massive Kronari warrior. His deep voice rumbled like distant thunder. "My people are stronger than humans. We can lift more weight, hit harder, withstand more damage. Yet I could not do what you are doing." Jake considered this as they walked. Strength isn't just about muscles, Grok. It's about will. It's about refusing to quit when things get hard. My people do not quit easily. I know, but you quit when logic tells you to quit. Humans keep going even when logic says it's impossible. That seems unwise. Maybe, Jake said with a laugh, but it works. As they continued through the canyon, word of Jake's feat began to spread among the squad. The impossible human who carried his friend 10 miles through hell. The soldier who refused to accept defeat, even the cold, logical Zephyrians were beginning to understand that there was something special about this human. Something that went beyond physical capability or military training. It was the power of friendship. The strength that came from refusing to leave anyone behind, and Jake Morrison was proving that sometimes the impossible was just another word for what humans did on a Tuesday afternoon. The extraction point came into view just as the twin suns began to set. Jake had been carrying Kekstar for nearly 8 hours, covering 15 miles of the most difficult terrain the training facility had to offer. His uniform was soaked with sweat, his legs shook with exhaustion, but he had never slowed his pace. The base looked like a welcome sight in the growing darkness. Lights flickered across the metal buildings carved into the canyon walls. Communication towers reached toward the star-filled sky. Most importantly, Jake could see the medical facility where Kekstar would finally get proper treatment. "We made it," Jake said, his voice hoarse from hours of talking to keep his friend conscious. Kekstar stirred on his back. "I cannot believe you actually did it. I told you I would get you home." The extraction team was already waiting at the perimeter. A full coalition medical unit with proper equipment and evacuation transport stood ready. As Jake approached the checkpoint, medical personnel swarmed around them. "Careful with him," Jake said as they prepared to transfer Kekstar to a medical stretcher. "His left rear leg is badly broken. The splint has been keeping it stable." Dr. Thren, the lead medical officer, examined Jake's improvised splint with professional interest. The device hummed as advanced scanners analyzed Kekstar's condition. "Remarkable," the doctor said. "This field splint maintained perfect bone alignment throughout the transport. The craftsmanship is primitive but highly effective." Jake helped transfer Kekstar to the medical stretcher, finally relieving himself of the weight he had carried for so many miles. As soon as his friend was secure, Jake's legs gave out. He collapsed to his knees, his body finally acknowledging the impossible feat he had just accomplished. Maria Santos rushed to his side with water and emergency supplies. "Easy, Jake. You did it. You actually did it." Rick Cole shook his head in amazement. 15 miles in 8 hours. Carrying 200 pounds through that terrain. "I've seen a lot of impossible things in my career, but this tops them all." The medical team worked quickly to stabilize Kekstar. Advanced healing devices sealed his internal injuries. Bone regeneration therapy began repairing his shattered leg. Within minutes, the alien's vital signs improved dramatically. "Will he be okay?" Jake asked, still breathing heavily. "He will make a full recovery," Dr. Thren replied. "But only because of your field treatment. Without that splint, he would have suffered permanent paralysis. You saved his life, Lieutenant." Velthor approached Jake, her crystalline features showing something that might have been shame. "Lieutenant Morrison, I owe you an apology." Jake looked up at her. "For what?" "I made a clinical judgment based on available resources and standard protocols. I calculated survival probabilities and resource allocation, but I failed to account for human factors." "Human factors?" "Your species' refusal to abandon comrades even when logic dictates otherwise. Your ability to achieve the impossible through sheer determination. Your stubborn insistence that every life has value. She paused. I was wrong to give up on him. Jake struggled to his feet, his legs still wobbly from exhaustion. We all make mistakes, Doc. The important thing is learning from them. What you did today will be remembered, Valther said. Word of your feat is already spreading throughout the coalition. The human who carried his friend 15 miles. The soldier who refused to leave anyone behind. Over the next few days. As Jake recovered and Kekstar healed in the medical bay, the story of their ordeal spread throughout the training facility. Officers from different worlds came to hear the tale firsthand. Medical personnel studied Jake's improvised splint design. Combat instructors analyzed his carrying techniques. Jake visited Kekstar every day in the medical bay. The Zephyrians. Injuries were healing rapidly thanks to advanced coalition medical technology. The doctors predicted he would be back to full duty within a week. I still do not understand why you did it, Kekstar said one afternoon, his compound eyes focused on his friend. In my culture, the individual is expected to sacrifice for the collective good. You risked everything for one person. Jake settled into the chair beside the medical bed. That's where you're wrong, Kex. I didn't risk anything for one person. I did it for all of us. I do not understand. Think about it. If I had left you behind, what would that have said to the rest of the squad? That humans abandon their friends when things get tough? But we only help people when it's convenient? Kekstar's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. I had not considered that perspective. But if I carry you home, even when it seems impossible, what does that tell everyone? Jake continued. It says that humans keep their promises, that we value every life, that you can count on us when everything goes wrong. Even when it defies logic? Especially when it defies logic, Jake said with a smile. Logic told us you were going to die. Logic said it was impossible to carry you 15 miles. Logic said we should give up and move on, but you ignored logic. I followed a different kind of logic, human logic. The kind that says friendship is more important than calculations. The kind that says impossible just means nobody has done it yet. Kekstar was quiet for a long moment. Your species is remarkable, Jake. Completely insane, but remarkable. Thanks, I think. The final test scores were posted a week later. Jake had not only passed his endurance trial, but earned the highest marks in the program's history. More importantly, he had earned something that could not be measured by any test, the respect of every coalition soldier on the base. Officers from across the galaxy approached Jake with questions about human military doctrine. They wanted to understand the philosophy that drove someone to carry a wounded comrade 15 miles through hostile terrain. It is simple, Jake would tell them. We leave no one behind. Not ever. That is what makes us human. General Korax, the base commander, called Jake to his office for a private meeting. The old Kronari warrior was a legend in coalition forces, with battle scars covering his massive frame. Lieutenant Morrison, the general said in his deep, rumbling voice, your actions during the training exercise have attracted attention at the highest levels of coalition command. Sir, what you did was theoretically impossible. Our medical experts have analyzed your performance. By all calculations, you should have collapsed within the first mile. Yet you maintained pace for 8 hours across difficult terrain. Jake shifted uncomfortably. I just did what any human would do, sir. That is precisely the point, General. Korax said, your species continues to surprise us. We thought we understood human capabilities, but clearly we underestimated you. The general pulled up a holographic display showing Jake's route through the canyon system. This will become required study for all coalition officers, not just as an example of physical endurance, but as a demonstration of leadership under impossible circumstances. Leadership, sir. You showed your squad that humans do not abandon their comrades. You proved that determination can overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles. Most importantly, you demonstrated that every individual has value worth fighting for. General Korax stood and walked to the window overlooking the training facility. The coalition faces many challenges in the galaxy, Lieutenant. Hostile forces that do not share our values. Situations where logic and calculations are not enough. We need soldiers who can achieve the impossible. Sir, you are being transferred to a special operations unit. Your squad will come with you. If they choose. The galaxy needs more humans like you, Morrison. Humans who refuse to quit. Humans who carry their friends home. Jake felt a surge of pride. Thank you, sir. I won't let you down. I know you will not. Because humans do not leave people behind, even when it is impossible. Later that evening, Jake sat with his squad in the mess hall. They were celebrating their graduation and new assignments. The mood was festive, but Jake noticed something different about how the other species looked at humans now. There was respect in their eyes, understanding, and perhaps a little bit of awe. So what happens now? Maria asked. Now we go out into the galaxy and show everyone what humans can do, Jake replied. More impossible missions? Rick asked with a grin. Probably. But that's okay. Impossible is just another word for what humans do on a regular basis. Kekstar raised his drink with one of his 4 hands. To humans, he said. The species that does not know when to quit. To friendship, Jake replied. The thing that makes impossible possible. As they toasted their success, Jake looked around at his squad. They were no longer just a random collection of beings from different worlds. They were a team, a family. And they had learned something important about what it meant to be human. Humans did not leave people behind. Humans carried their friends home, even when logic said it could not be done. Humans believed that every life had value, and they were willing to do impossible things to prove it. In the files of the Galactic Defense Coalition, a new notation appeared in the human species profile, recommended for scenarios requiring impossible persistence and irrational loyalty to comrades. Effective when standard protocols fail. Note: what appears irrational to other species may represent advanced survival strategy. Jake would have laughed if he had seen it. Advanced survival strategy. That was one way to describe friendship, but in a galaxy full of logic and calculations, maybe the universe needed a little more friendship.